Welcome the anointed ones. The most terrifying power in the world is a person who is underestimated, undetected, and then undeniable. There's something off about you, and people can't stop trying to crack the code. One moment they thought they had you figured out. Next thing they know, you've made a leap so mind-blowing they're blinking like glitching robots trying to process it. They're not just surprised, they're studying you. Your life has officially become a private investigation. The group chats are buzzing, the fake friends are watching like undercover agents, even your enemies are silently scrolling through your life like they missed a crucial episode. Why? Because what you've just pulled off defies everything they thought they knew. You didn't follow their rules, you didn't beg, you didn't crumble, you didn't even explain yourself. You just appeared at the finish line with a crown they swore you'd never touch. Here's a fact they don't want to face. Most people can't figure you out because they never took time to find themselves. They've been playing by illusions and tricks while you were building from truth and depth. Now they want to know what you know, but they don't have the character to carry it. And let's be real, they thought you were just the quiet one. Now they're Googling, stalking, whispering and spiraling like, wait, how did they pull this off without clout backup or a sugar daddy? Buckle up, because in this video, we're going deep into why they're losing their minds, what you did that they can't replicate, and why your rise is making even your critics rethink their entire identity. You didn't just win, you rewrote the blueprint. And now they're scrambling to decode what they were too arrogant to respect. Let's get into it. Number one, they're studying you like a puzzle because your victory defies their blueprint of survival. They're studying you like a puzzle because your success doesn't make sense to them. Not because you were lucky, or because you had all the resources, but because by their standards you weren't even in the game. You weren't networking with the right people. You weren't faking smiles at fake events. You weren't constantly broadcasting every move. You weren't even trying to impress them. And yet somehow, you won. That's what's driving them crazy. These people thought they understood how the world worked. They had a formula: manipulate a little here, step on a few people there, wear the right mask, make it look good on the outside, even if it's rotting on the inside. But you didn't do any of that. You stayed quiet. You stayed grounded. You stayed real. And now you've shown up in rooms they swore you'd never be allowed in, doing things they never thought you were capable of. That's why they're obsessed. You broke their mental algorithm. You were supposed to fail. You were supposed to stay small. And because they never actually paid attention to your essence, they can't figure out what they missed. Now they're rewatching the scenes of your life like detectives. How did they pull that off? When did that happen? Who helped them? They're dissecting your moves in slow motion because your success exposed the lie of their own efforts. The truth is, they're not mad at what you've achieved. They're mad because you didn't have to betray yourself to get it. You didn't have to become someone else. You didn't have to post every breath to prove your worth. You just became. And that's terrifying to people who built their lives on performance, not purpose. What they don't understand is that while they were focused on optics, you were focused on obedience, to growth, to healing, to something higher. You were building in silence, in private, in pain. But now that it's public, they're scrambling. Not because they hate you, but because your success is forcing them to confront a terrifying thought. Maybe I did it all wrong. And the truth? You didn't pull it off because you were lucky. You pulled it off because you were never playing their game to begin with. Number two, you pulled it off because you let the pain educate you. They let it embitter them. Most people let pain break them. You let it build you. That's the difference. That's what they're trying to figure out but can't wrap their heads around. They went through things too, heartbreak, betrayal, setbacks, but instead of learning from it, they let it harden them. They got bitter. You got better. And now they're wondering how in the world you're still standing, smiling, glowing, winning, while they're still stuck in the same emotional loop from 5 years ago. You didn't pull off this transformation because you had fewer problems. You probably had more. The kind of pain you endured doesn't even have language. The kind of betrayal you experienced could have turned you cold, but you didn't let it. You allowed it to open your eyes, not close your heart. While others became cynical and guarded, you leaned in deeper. You faced the darkness, sat with the questions, and went through the inner surgery most people are too afraid to do. What they don't realize is that your breakthrough wasn't a one-day event. It was the slow grind of refusing to let pain define you. While they drank the poison of resentment, you swallowed the medicine of truth, even when it burned. That's how you evolved. That's how you moved from survival to wisdom. That's how you turned wounds into wisdom. While others kept picking at their scars, they're looking at the results, but they don't understand the process. They're clapping for the glow, but they have no idea it came from walking through fire without burning bridges or becoming bitter. And now they see you thriving, peaceful, full of light, and it confuses them. Because they know what you went through, they just didn't expect you to learn from it. They expected it to ruin you the way it ruined them. You didn't use pain as an excuse, you used it as a teacher. You asked the hard questions, did the deep work, and chose not to let your history become your identity. That kind of emotional intelligence can't be taught in books. It's earned in the dark, behind closed doors, in silence. And now they want the outcome, but can't handle the internal work that created it. That's why they're confused. That's why they're watching you like a mystery. Number 3, you operated in silence, but not to be mysterious. You were being obedient to divine timing. You weren't quiet because you were weak. You weren't low-key because you lacked ambition. And you definitely weren't in the background because you didn't have anything going for you. You were silent because you were being processed. Life was doing something deep and surgical inside you, and every time you tried to explain it to someone, they couldn't grasp it. So eventually, you stopped trying. You understood that some things aren't meant to be broadcast while they're still becoming. People thought your silence meant failure, that you gave up, that you had nothing to offer. But the truth is, you were in a season of divine preparation. You were being stripped of distractions, false attachments, and toxic patterns. You were being shaped into someone unrecognizable, even to your old self. You weren't hiding, you were healing. You weren't lost. You were being rerouted. And now that you've surfaced, they're confused because they didn't see any of the work happening underground. They were loud the whole time, posting, talking, performing. You were quiet, listening, learning, waiting. Not because you lacked confidence, but because you had clarity. You didn't need the world's validation to know something powerful was building inside you. And that's what sets you apart. You weren't trying to look successful, you were trying to become solid. You didn't want quick fame. You wanted real foundation. And now that your moment has come, it looks like you came out of nowhere. But in truth, you were just in a space they couldn't access. That kind of patience, that kind of trust in divine timing. It confuses people who are addicted to shortcuts. It bothers those who measure progress by visibility, because to them, silence equals stagnancy. But for you, silence was sacred. It was strategy. It was surrender. Now they're replaying everything, wondering how they missed it, how they underestimated you, how you showed up fully formed with wisdom, power, peace, and presence, like you skipped steps. But you didn't skip anything, you just didn't share your process with people who weren't qualified to witness it. They thought you were irrelevant, but really you were in alignment. And now that it's your season, everything you built in private is echoing so loudly they can't ignore it, even if they try. Number 4, you didn't pull it off. You endured until it manifested. People see the outcome and call it a win, but what they don't realize is that your life wasn't shaped by wins. It was shaped by what didn't break you. You didn't pull this off because you had the perfect plan or some secret advantage. You endured, that's it. You endured the betrayal, the confusion, the isolation, the silence, the doubt, the rejection, and the heartbreak. You kept showing up to a life that kept knocking you down, not because you always had strength, but because you refused to let pain be the end of your story. They want to celebrate your breakthrough like it happened overnight. But they weren't there during the long nights that bled into each other. They didn't see the version of you that had to talk yourself out of quitting over and over again. They didn't feel the weight of the disappointment you carried while still being expected to smile and function like everything was fine. You lived through hell silently. That's what built this version of you. Not magic, not luck, not some genius move, just pure spiritual endurance. People ask, how did you do it? Because they want to believe there's a shortcut. They want to copy the blueprint. But your path was custom built through trial and fire. It's not something that can be taught. Your strength came from surviving what would have crushed most people. Your glow came from crawling out of places you were never supposed to leave alive. And if we're being honest, the real miracle isn't what you've built. It's the fact that you're still here. You didn't always believe it would happen. There were seasons where you were surviving on fumes, times when everything in you screamed to give up, but some small flicker of faith kept you holding on just long enough. That's what they don't understand. That's what they can't stomach. You didn't have a big break, you had big breakdowns, and you kept rising through each one. They think you pulled it off like it was some clean, strategic play. But this wasn't polished. It was messy, bloody, and raw. The victory isn't just in what you gained. It's in the fact that you didn't lose yourself trying to make it through. That's the real story. That's the part they'll never understand. Number 5, your access came from alignment, not approval. There was a time when you thought you had to win people over to get ahead. You tried to be agreeable, humble yourself into rooms that didn't deserve you, and play small so others wouldn't feel threatened. You bent over backwards for people who couldn't even sit upright in their own character. But somewhere along the way, you got tired of begging for crumbs, tired of over-explaining, tired of molding yourself into something digestible just to be tolerated. That's when the shift happened. You stopped chasing approval, and something miraculous happened. The right doors started opening. Not because you forced them, but because your energy stopped attracting users and started attracting alignment. You no longer needed to be chosen by people who never even saw you clearly in the first place. And in letting go of that desperate need for acceptance, you stepped into something much deeper, divine alignment. That's what people can't figure out. You're not moving like someone trying to impress. You're moving like someone who's already approved by something higher. That kind of confidence, quiet, grounded, sacred, unsettles those who depend on attention to feel important. Because while they were playing to the crowd, you were tapping into a higher frequency. And in that space, you stopped being likable and started being dangerous to darkness. People are confused by how fast things shifted for you, but it wasn't luck. It was release. The moment you stopped trying to fit into broken systems, broken relationships, and broken narratives, the flow came. You weren't being punished before, you were being delayed by your own attachments. Once you snapped out of that cycle and said, enough, everything changed. The room you couldn't get into before, you didn't need it. A better one opened. The people who rejected you, they got replaced by people who respected you. And the irony is you became more magnetic when you stopped seeking attention. Because alignment glows differently. It's not loud, but it's felt. It's not flashy, but it's undeniable. That's why they're confused. They're still out here auditioning. You already signed the contract with your purpose. They're trying to be accepted. You're moving in authority. That's the difference. That's why they can't figure out how you did it, because it wasn't man-made. It was divine. Number 6, you mastered the unseen game, spiritual laws they laughed at. They laughed at your faith like it was foolish, like it was wishful thinking. While they were busy calculating, scheming, and faking their way into rooms, you were aligning yourself with something far deeper than the physical. They thought you were naive, too quiet, too patient, too trusting. But what they didn't see is that while they were mastering manipulation, you were mastering universal law. You were learning how the unseen shapes everything we see. You studied energy while they studied control. You learned how intention carries weight, how the frequency you operate in determines what you attract, and how obedience, yes, even when it doesn't make sense, puts you in position for miracles they can't manufacture. You understood that timing isn't always on your schedule, but when it's divine, it's always right. That's the game they didn't know you were playing. They believed power was about how loud you are, how connected you seem, or how much you can flex. You learned power was about alignment, authority, purpose, integrity. You moved with a knowing while they moved with noise. And now they're stuck in cycles because they only ever learned how to perform. You, on the other hand, transformed from the inside out. They don't understand how you kept rising without selling out, how you kept glowing without being part of their gossip chains. They saw you praying when they were plotting, meditating when they were mocking, resting when they were rushing, and still, here you are, winning in ways they can't replicate. Not because you're smarter, richer, or more connected, but because you're in flow with something they can't imitate. They mastered shortcuts, You mastered surrender. They studied optics. You studied obedience. And now they're confused because the laws you followed were spiritual, and spiritual laws always override manipulation, even if they take longer to show results. You didn't play the game to win people, you played it to win alignment, and you did. That's why they're shook, because now they realize what they dismissed as soft was actually sacred, what they mocked as delusional was actually divine discipline, and what they laughed at in you is now the very thing they secretly want to understand, but can't. Because it's not just knowledge, it's revelation, and revelation can't be faked. Number 7. They're panicking because your life just exposed how fake theirs is. They're not panicking because you hurt them. They're panicking because your life, by simply being real, is a mirror they've been avoiding for years. You didn't call them out. You didn't expose their lies. You didn't drag them publicly. But your authenticity is louder than any speech, any shade, or any clapback. You are living proof that it's possible to rise without manipulating, to succeed without selling out, and to heal without pretending. And that threatens everything they built their image on. They spent years curating a version of themselves that looks successful on the outside but is hollow on the inside. Every move was strategic. Every friendship was transactional. Every post was performance. They built a life around being seen, not being whole. Then you showed up, flawed, transparent, growing in public and still winning. That's what's breaking them down. You didn't beat them at their game. You proved the game itself is fake. Now they're stuck, because to accept your success means admitting they've been living a lie. It means questioning the personas they built, the people they hurt to get ahead, and the truth they abandoned to appear powerful. Your joy without bitterness, that wrecks them. Your confidence without ego, that exposes them. Your success without stepping on people, that humiliates them, because it reveals how unnecessary their cruelty really was. They're uncomfortable because your life says you didn't have to be fake to succeed, you chose to be. And there's no defense against that kind of truth, so they panic. They start to downplay your achievements. They whisper that you got lucky. They suddenly find flaws in what you're doing, but the truth is their world is crumbling. Their image no longer inspires, it now looks like a costume. What you're experiencing isn't just admiration, it's silent rage wrapped in curiosity. They want to hate you, but deep down they want what you have. Peace that isn't purchased, confidence that isn't performative, and success that didn't require a mask. And they're realizing too late that the only thing standing between them and real joy is themselves. You didn't just rise, you revealed, and now they're exposed. Number 8. You didn't outperform them, you outlasted their weapons. You didn't get ahead because you were faster, louder, or more connected. You got ahead because you endured what most people would have folded under. They came for you with everything they had: gossip, rejection, setups, silent sabotage, and you were supposed to collapse under the pressure, but you didn't. That's what's haunting them now, not just your rise, but the fact that you rose after they actively tried to make sure you couldn't. They didn't expect you to bounce back. In fact, they were counting on your silence becoming permanent. They watched the betrayal happen. Some of them even participated in it. They smiled in your face while plotting your undoing behind your back. They were sure the humiliation, the losses, and the loneliness would drain you dry. They thought if they could make life hard enough for long enough, you'd quietly disappear. But you didn't disappear, you evolved. What they didn't understand is that you weren't fueled by ego. You were fueled by purpose. You weren't just trying to succeed, you were called to become. That kind of motivation doesn't shut down when things get hard. It ignites when things get hard. And while they were throwing stones, you were learning how to build. While they were laughing, you were growing teeth. While they were trying to block you, life was training you to walk through fire barefoot if you had to. You didn't outperform them. You didn't need to. You outlasted their weapons. You endured the silent wars, the spiritual warfare, the gaslighting, the smear campaigns, the emotional exhaustion, and instead of shrinking, you solidified. That's why they're spiraling. Because every trap they set, you outgrew. Every attack they launched, you absorbed and turned into fuel. And now they're stuck with the aftermath of their own behavior, and you're shining in spite of it. They can't process it. Because in their world, cruelty is power. But in your world, resilience is currency, and you're wealthy in ways they can't measure. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually, you're still here. That alone is a defeat they never saw coming. You didn't win by being flashy. You won by surviving everything they swore would finish you off. That's what they can't get over. That's what they can't replicate. And that's why they're still watching you, confused, offended, and secretly in awe. Number 9, you escape the algorithm of normality, and that makes you unpredictable. You don't move like they expect, and that's exactly why they can't figure you out. You've escaped the emotional algorithm most people are trapped in. You don't chase after people who ghost you. You don't clap back every time someone throws shade. You don't post vague messages for attention. You don't try to prove your worth to people who already made the mistake of doubting you. That's why you feel like a glitch in their matrix. They're used to people playing emotional chess. You don't even sit at that table anymore. Most people operate on predictability. Say something to trigger them and boom, they'll respond exactly how you calculated. Withdraw a little and they'll overextend. Offer approval and they'll chase validation. But you don't need approval. You've built your identity without it. You don't react, you observe, you don't retaliate, you rise. And that makes you unreadable to people who rely on manipulation as a strategy. You're not addicted to attention, you're not ruled by insecurity. You don't post your pain for sympathy or perform your joy for applause. You've learned how to sit with your emotions without becoming enslaved to them. That's rare. And for people who only understand connection through control, you're frustrating because you can't be played like the others. They thought they could study you like they've studied everyone else, run the same emotional scripts and get the same outcomes. But you broke the code. You're not desperate for closure. You're not waiting on an apology. You don't need revenge to feel at peace. You've stepped into a version of yourself that isn't ruled by lack. And that's terrifying for people who only know how to operate through emotional leverage. They want to know what makes you tick, but the truth is you've evolved past survival mode. You're no longer reacting from wounds, you're responding from wisdom. That makes you unpredictable, not because you're erratic, but because you're free. You don't flinch when tested. You don't panic when misunderstood. You move with inner calm, and inner calm can't be manipulated. They can't trace you, they can't bait you. And they sure as hell can't break you. You escaped their algorithm when you chose healing over games. And now they're stuck trying to decode a soul that's no longer playing by their rules. Number 10. You pulled it off because you let go of everything that was killing you, even if it had your last name. You didn't just succeed, you escaped. And not from some obvious trap, but from the emotional prisons that most people never leave because they're dressed up as tradition, family, loyalty, and what we've always done. You let go of things that were poisoning your spirit. Even when those things came wrapped in love, wrapped in obligation, wrapped in your own DNA. That's what made your rise different. That's what makes people stare in disbelief now. You pulled it off because you had the courage to walk away from what everyone else still worships. You chose growth over comfort, and not the pretty kind of growth that gets celebrated. You chose the kind of growth that isolates you, gets you talked about, and makes people say, "Who do you think you are?" You became the person who said, "This dysfunction stops with me." You said no to cycles that were passed down like heirlooms. You put distance between yourself and people you love, not out of spite, but out of survival. That takes a kind of internal strength most people never develop because they're too afraid to be the first one to break the chain. You were willing to carry the weight of being misunderstood. You were willing to endure the guilt trips, the emotional blackmail, the confusion of walking away from people you once called home. And for what? Peace, sanity, future, for something deeper than tradition, for truth. That's the kind of decision that doesn't look brave on the outside, but it's revolutionary on the inside. Most people are still tangled in family dynamics that destroy them, still holding on to relationships because they've known the person for years, still loyal to pain because it's familiar. But you broke the contract. You said, just because it's my blood doesn't mean it gets to bleed me dry. You chose your soul over their story. That's what changed everything. And now they look at you and can't understand how you pulled it off, how you got free, how you started winning. But it's because you sacrificed what they still cling to. You gave up the false sense of belonging to build something real. You created a new standard, a new lineage, a new bloodline, one that begins with healing, not harm. That's what they don't teach you in families, but you figured it out, and that's why you're no longer trapped. You're transformed. Number 11. You made it because you were willing to be the villain in their story, to be the hero in God's. You made peace with something that most people never do. You let them see you as the villain. You stopped wasting your breath trying to defend yourself to people who were committed to misunderstanding you. You realized that in their story you would always be the one who changed, who walked away, who stopped calling, who acted different, who set boundaries they refused to respect. And you didn't flinch. You let them narrate whatever version made them feel better, and you kept moving forward anyway. That's what gave you the edge. You didn't let ego keep you stuck in situations that were draining your spirit. You didn't need to be liked. You needed to be free. And when you chose that freedom, it cost you people, places, and approval, but it bought you alignment. You traded their comfort zone for your calling, and that's something they can't comprehend. They thought your silence meant guilt, but it was discipline. They thought your distance meant arrogance, but it was clarity. While they were gossiping, exaggerating, and trying to rally others against you, you were in the wilderness getting refined. You were shedding layers, dying to the old version of yourself, and walking through battles they never knew existed. And you didn't post about it. You didn't explain it. You just grew. That's why they're stunned now, because in their eyes you disappeared. But in reality, you were being developed. You weren't hiding, you were becoming. And now that the results are speaking, they don't know how to respond. Because they spent so much time trashing your name, they weren't prepared to watch you thrive. They wanted you to come back and argue. They wanted the fight, the reaction, the breakdown, but you chose elevation over retaliation. You didn't try to rewrite their version of the story. You outlived it. And that's why you're winning. Because you weren't trying to prove who you were to them. You were proving who you were to God, and that's a mission they were never equipped to stop. You understood something they never did. Being misunderstood is temporary, but being obedient to your purpose, that has eternal impact. And now, while they're stuck rehearsing the past, you've stepped fully into your future, not as their villain, but as the hero of your own redemption arc. Number 12. You made peace with the idea of starting over. That's what made you unstoppable. Didn't just get ahead because of what you gained. You got ahead because of what you were bold enough to let go. That's what people can't understand. They're not shocked by your success. They're haunted by the fact that you were willing to burn bridges they're still scared to walk across. You didn't just start over, you let entire versions of yourself die, and you didn't mourn them publicly. You let the old identities, the old relationships, the old narratives collapse quietly while the world thought you were just figuring things out. Most people are terrified of starting over because they think it means failure. But you made starting over your strategy. You saw it for what it really is, a clean slate, not a setback. You didn't cling to history just to say you had one. You didn't hold on to people just because of the years invested. You had the guts to walk away from almost everything you once prayed for, because you finally realized that if it costs your peace, it's too expensive, even if it came wrapped in loyalty, love, or memories. What makes you unstoppable is that you're not attached to comfort. You've been through enough loss to know that endings are often just disguised invitations into alignment. You're not chasing permanence, you're chasing truth. And if that means starting over 100 times, so be it. Every time you stripped yourself down, you came back sharper, lighter, stronger, more clear. People watched from a distance, expecting to see you crumble, but each fall only revealed another layer of you they didn't know existed. They can't process that, because they're still negotiating with their fear, still clinging to people who drain them, still attached to a version of life that looks good on the outside but feels hollow inside. And when they see you unapologetically thriving in a life that looks nothing like what you started with, it confuses them, because they know deep down they would never have had the courage to start over like you did. You mastered the art of release, and in that mastery you discovered something most people will never taste: freedom. That's what made you unstoppable, not the wins, not the applause, but the quiet decision to walk away from anything that no longer aligned, even if you had to rebuild alone. Number 13, you beat the system because you weren't playing their game, you were building a kingdom. You weren't in the race they thought you were in. While they were competing, comparing, and copying, You were creating something they couldn't see. You were building a life that wasn't based on attention or applause, but on something sacred, substance. They chased numbers, image, trends, and clout. You chased healing, growth, integrity, and alignment. And now the system they worshipped has turned on them. While you've built something so real, so rooted, it can't be shaken. They followed the script, play the part, say the right things, look successful even if it's fake. You didn't just tear the script up, you wrote a whole new book. They don't understand how you made it because you didn't use the same ingredients. You weren't trying to become popular. You were trying to become whole. You weren't perfecting a persona. You were healing from your past. You weren't trying to impress strangers. You were trying to live in truth. And in doing so, you found a freedom they can't fake. The truth is, you were never interested in playing their game because you knew the game was rigged. You saw how many people had success but no peace, followers but no direction, platforms but no soul. And instead of trying to win that game, you opted out entirely. You weren't lazy. You were focused on something deeper, a life that wouldn't collapse when the spotlight turned off. They thought they were beating you. They thought your silence meant failure. But while they were rushing for recognition, you were laying a foundation that would outlive trends, opinions, and popularity contests. They looped themselves into cycles, chasing relevance, defending lies, managing facades. But you were building something eternal, something rooted in purpose, not performance. Now they look up and you're thriving, and they can't figure out why their strategies aren't working anymore. Because the system they built their lives on is collapsing, and you're untouched. You're not fighting for scraps of attention anymore. You're seated at a table you built, a kingdom of your own making, not because you wanted to rule over others, but because you finally ruled over yourself. You didn't beat them at their game, you outgrew it. And now they're exhausted from chasing illusions while you're living in a reality that was never meant to be a game in the first place. Number 14, they're trying to study your strategy, but what you have can't be copied because it was forged in sacred fire. They're dissecting your movements like it's a formula, watching your content, mimicking your mannerisms, replicating your rhythms as if what you carry can be downloaded, rehearsed, or reverse engineered. But what they fail to understand is that your essence didn't come from a course. It came from consecration. This wasn't strategy, it was survival. This wasn't branding, it was becoming. You didn't master a technique, you endured a transformation that burned away everything false until only truth remained. They want your glow but can't handle your fire. They're intrigued by the results but would collapse under the weight of your process. Because what you carry wasn't born in a think tank. It was forged in agony, sharpened by betrayal and baptized in isolation. You didn't learn this in a classroom, you learned it in the crucible. That's why, when they try to imitate you, it doesn't hit the same. Because your authenticity has weight. It's not just what you do, it's who you had to become to do it. You didn't just wake up with insight, you wrestled for it, you lost things for it, you walked through doors you never wanted to walk through, and faced things you never signed up for, just to become aligned with your assignment. Your wisdom is layered with bruises and your grace came with a cost. So when they try to study your output without understanding your origins, they're missing the entire blueprint because your real secret isn't what you do, it's what you carry. And what you carry can't be copied. They can't decode your frequency because it was calibrated in a realm they've never tapped into. You didn't go viral, you went vertical. You were broken open in private so that what flows through you in public carries a purity they can't fake. And now that the fruit is undeniable, they're desperate to map your method. But there is no method, only a mantle. And mantles aren't learned, they're assigned. Let them study all they want. Let them mimic the style, the cadence, the content. But understand this, fire doesn't transfer through mimicry. It transfers through refinement. And unless they're willing to go through what you went through, they will never carry what you carry. Because sacred oil doesn't come cheap, and your life was the olive press. They can study you, mimic you, talk about you, obsess over you, but they will never be you. Because what you've become is not a product of strategy, trends, or convenience. It's the result of relentless internal war, private obedience, and choosing alignment over applause every single time. You didn't just pull it off. You survived what should have taken you out. You outlasted attacks that were designed to dismantle you. And most of all, you stayed devoted to your calling while the world begged you to conform. They're crying behind closed doors, not just because you succeeded, but because you did it without playing their game. You didn't break rules. You broke patterns. You weren't trying to look strong. You became strong through sacred fire. And now everything they thought they could manipulate, delay, or control has flipped in your favor, because what they didn't see coming is that your anointing would outlive their weapons. You're not just a mystery. They can't decode you because you weren't built to be understood by the crowd. You were shaped by God, sharpened in pain, and set apart for a purpose that doesn't fit their mold. So let them keep guessing. Let them keep talking. Let them try to copy what they'll never carry. Because the truth is simple. You didn't win by being like them. You won by refusing to stop becoming you. And that is what they'll never be able to replicate. Now that you know what you carry, don't shrink. Don't explain. Just keep shining. The real ones feel it, and the rest, they'll keep wondering how you pulled it off. This message stirred something deep inside you. If it made you feel seen, understood, or even just confirmed what you already knew in your spirit, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss another revelation like this. Like this video if it spoke to your journey, your process, or your purpose. Drop a comment and let us know what resonated with you the most. We read every single one. And most importantly, share this with someone you know is walking a similar path. Someone who's being watched, questioned, doubted, and still rising anyway. This isn't just a video, it's a confirmation. And if you're here, that means it found you right on time. Welcome home, chosen one. We rise together. God bless you.